Hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again, and today I am doing what's probably going to be quite a long but quite a singular video, which is just going to be a reading order of Black Widow by Marvel Comics. Been a little while since I've done a reading order video. The reason for that is I'm breathing away in a couple of series of very large and comprehensive reading orders, and in between doing all the reading and research for those, I just thought I'd have a bit of a palate cleanser and just do a quick, short, self-contained character. So I thought, why not? I quite fancy checking out Black Widow by Marvel. In so doing, I've read 110 single issues, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a quick, easy palate cleanser between much larger reads on either side. And yeah, I thought I could cover it all, hopefully, in a single video for you, the viewers. So, as I said, it's 110 issues. I will point out, however, this is not a guide to the character. I'm not going to be talking about the background of Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, the Red Room, White Widow, all these things. I'm not going to go into that. If you want something like that, check out another channel like Comic Story or something like that. To check out someone who does those kinds of lore videos. This is not a lore video. This is purely for someone who wants to read Black Widow and wants to make sure they're covering all the key series in a reasonably well recommended order by someone who's actually read every single issue that they're talking about and can give a clear recommendation. With that said, 110 issues is obviously just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Black Widow. Black Widow's been around since the 70s, if not earlier. She's been in loads of comics and has featured in lots of team up comics and lots of team groups and Avengers and all these other sorts of things across Marvel Comics for absolutely ages. I am not doing an exhaustive overview of all her appearances and all the stories that she's been key in because there would just be too many for me. If you're interested in that, please check out the website Crushing Crisis, which I've mentioned a few times before. It's a really great website with really incredibly comprehensive overviews of characters. And the overview for Black Widow covers every single appearance of Black Widow in every single issue that you could imagine, all way back since your very first appearance. So if you're interested in a full, ultra comprehensive Type P type reading experience, please check out Crushing Crisis. From my point of view, Crushing Crisis is where I started with this reading order. However, it didn't quite hit what I needed, and it's not as quite as up to date for this particular character as I wanted to go. And so I'm building on the good work done here and done on the Marvel Fandom website to provide you this guide. As such, what I'm going to be covering are all the titular series for Black Widow, so all the ones that have Black Widow as the title of the comic or some derivation thereof. One really interesting thing that I learned that I had no idea about before I started reading this was that Yelena, the other Black Widow, is a major part of the comics. Now, I should point out Yelena is the character from the movie Black Widow, which came out at the beginning of Phase 4 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I've watched it. I thought it was okay. I didn't really like it very much. But to be honest, I thought that the character that was introduced there, I think it's Florence Pugh is the actress. Um, I was like, okay, this is cool, this is interesting, but this is a new thing they've just thrown in there for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Little did I realize that actually that character of Yelena is a really key character throughout Black Widow's entire history. And as a result, any reading order of Black Widow comics, it really is a reading order of both Natasha Romanoff and Yelena Belova. And there's literally no point in trying to extricate the two. I think it's kind of possible, but all the stories are so closely nested between these two characters from the very first Black Widow self-contained series in the 90s that it felt redundant to try to separate the two. So in my comics collection, I've actually collected all these single issues and trade cut and so on. They're all together on the same shelf on my bookshelf because these two characters are so closely intertwined that trying to tease them out as a separate thing just felt redundant. Finally, before I dive into it, I just want to point out that I don't have a reading map for this because actually all that's required is a clear list of each individual series that's released in an approximate chronology. I say approximate chronology. It's chronology in terms of real world publishing, but not in terms of the character's history. If you're keen on a chronology in terms of character history, so internal chronology in the Marvel Universe, then this channel is not for you because that's a very Type P way of reading comics, and I'm a Type J reader, as has been mentioned on previous videos that I've talked about in much more length. As well as that, I'm actually sort of reconsidering and reflecting on how I'll be able to do reading maps in the future to do with a much more comprehensive maps I'm building up, like, for example, the one for DC Rebirth. So whilst I'm still umming and ahhing and working out the software kinks, I just thought I'd do a clear list, which I will show you throughout this guide. Well, with no further ado, let's dive straight into it. The very first titular self-contained Black Widow series that this character had for herself was Black Widow Volume 1. It was published from April 1999 till June 1999, and it was written by Devin Grayson with art by J.G. Jones. It was only a 3-issue miniseries. It contained 3 issues. Now, it's often subtitled The Itsy Bitsy Spider. Fine. I mean, you can call it that if you want. But each issue had its own title. So the first one was Uninvited, the second one was Ingenue, and the third one was ID. So some people call it the Itsy Bitsy Spider, some people call it Black Widow Volume 1. Either way, that was the 3-issue series. In this series, Black Widow, Natasha, is assigned to Rapistan by both the Pentagon and by Russian intelligence to investigate a new bioweapon. However, she then ends up interacting with a new Black Widow, Yelena Belova. So this is my point. Straight away from day one in her first standalone series, the series is actually split between her and Yelena. That is followed by Black Widow Volume 2. And of course, when we say Volume 2, we're talking about volume with a big V. So another way to think about it if you're new to comics is series or season 2 of Black Widow. This came out in November 2000 to March 2001, written again by Devin Grayson, but this time supported by Greg Rucker. That's important for a reason we'll go into in a second. And again, it's a 3-issue series. So this story arc was called Breakdown, and again, it's about Yelena Belova. In fact, to an extent, she's the main character in this, but with a lot of the original Black Widow, Natasha, involved in it as well. This then takes us to a third series. Now, this is not Black Widow Volume 3. This is a series called Black Widow Pale Little Spider. Now, it came out in April 2002, ended in June 2002, a 3-issue series written solely by Greg Rucker without Devin Grayson. And this is a series that is only about Yelena. Natasha is literally mentioned once in passing in one speech bubble in issue 3. The rest of it is a complete Yelena-focused story. And like I say, it's called Black Widow, Pale Little Spider. No volume, no series number, no season number, nothing like that. Now, these 3 seasons we've just talked about, Black Widow Volume 1, Black Widow Volume 2, and Black Widow Pale Little Spider, are all collected in one trade paperback. They're all in their own individual trade paperbacks as well, but they're also collected in one trade paperback. And for more information on how these are all collected, again, I'd refer you to the Crushing Crisis website. Next up, we actually have Black Widow Official Volume 3. So no subtitle. This is now series or season 3, but it's the 4th thing you should be reading. I hope you're keeping up. I am going to be flashing up the reading map as it builds throughout the course of this 30-minute video, so hopefully it'll be quite clear. So Black Widow series or volume 3 was from October 2004 to February 2005. It was written by Richard Morgan. If you don't know who Richard Morgan is, he's basically a science fiction writer. He wrote Altered Carbon, which I think is now a show on Netflix, and a few other bits and pieces. It's a 6-issue series. It was illustrated by Bill Sienkiewicz. I know that a lot of people are huge fans of his work ever since his work on stuff like Elektra. Like I say, it's a 6-issue series, and in it, it focuses almost entirely on Natasha. Yelena is literally only mentioned the once. However, and this is weird, it's a weird editorial choice, this 6-issue series has a direct sequel, and the direct sequel is not Black Widow Volume 4. It is, in fact, and pay attention here, Black Widow 2, The Things They Say About Her. And it is another 6-issue series that is a direct sequel to Black Widow Volume 3. It was published from September 2005 to December 2006, so literally there's only a couple of months between one season and the next. I don't know why they didn't just make Black Widow Volume 3 a 12-issue season, especially given this is also written by Richard Morgan and also has art by Bill Sienkiewicz. Editorial is really weird sometimes, but that's the way it goes. Anyway, so we have Black Widow 2, The Things They Say About Her. These are the covers. There are 6 issues, and it's a direct sequel to what we've just talked about, Black Widow Volume 3. Now, Yelena is in this briefly. She's in issue 1 of this series and also in issues 5 and 6. I should point out, Yelena's character arc is pretty weird at this point. She was an alternate Black Widow. She was an international Russian assassin as part of the Red Room. Then she kind of goes a bit rogue, and you have to read stuff like Pale Little Spy to really understand what's going on with her. And then by the time these comics come out, she's essentially an international lingerie model with a supermodel fashioning empire and a lingerie label. Yes, that's exactly what it is. I know it sounds crazy. That's just what's going on. Don't worry, it gets crazier. So after Black Widow 2, the things they say about her, we then move on to not Black Widow Volume 4, we move on to Black Widow Deadly Origin, which is a 4-issue miniseries that was published in 2009 to 2010 and written by Paul Cornell. Now, this is one of those stories that's kind of got loads of flashbacks and talks loads about sort of her origin, as you might imagine from the title. It was good. It's a decent story, and I've put it here, even though a lot of people would say, "Oh, you've got to read this first." I put it here because this is when it was released chronologically in the real world, and personally, I feel as a result, this kind of suits the slow um, revealing and slow unraveling of the characters' backstory and history and mystery. So, as a Type J reader, I would say you should read this here. If you want to read it in chronological order, go check out some other channels. But I don't feel that reading it in terms of internal chronology, and this being the origin story set at the beginning, I don't feel that's the most satisfying narrative experience. After that, after Black Widow Deadly Origin, we then finally have Black Widow Volume 4. Which is a 5 issues. Well, it's not a 5 issue series. So it's an 8 issue series that was released from 2010 until November 2010. Now, the first 5 issues is collected in a trade paperback called The Name of the Rose, and that was written by Marjorie Liu. Um, yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty decent. I don't have a huge amount to add to that. I find Marjorie Liu kind of a hit and miss experience, but if you're a fan of her writing, check it out. Then the next 3 issues, issues 6, 7, and 8, are collected in another trade paperback, a very slim trade paperback, admittedly, called Kiss or Kill. And that's written by Duan Sawzinski, I want to say. I may or may not be wrong, with art by Manuel Garcia. Now, this kicks off a new story arc, and probably thinking, that's weird, it's a new story arc that's only 3 issues long. The reason for that is that although Black Widow Volume 4 is the 5 issue arc and then the 3 issue arc that I'm showing you now, that final 3 issue arc leads smoothly and directly in to the next series, which is Black Widow Widowmaker. I'm showing you the covers here. Widowmaker was a series that came out in December 2010. So if you're paying attention, the previous series, Black Widow Volume 4, issue 8 came out in November 2010, and then the first issue of Widowmaker came out the next month. As always, I don't understand why editorial does these things. Why not just have one overarching series with more straightforward numbering, especially given the story is a direct and implicit and, well, explicit sequel. Anyway, the story Black Widow, Widowmaker was written by Jim McCann. And yeah, it's a decent story. Also, I want to point out features Mockingbird and Hawkeye. One thing to point out, something happens in here that affects Hawkeye. I'm not going to go into what it is, but as a result, it's quite an important thing if you're reading Hawkeye stories. And if you want to follow that on and find out what happens to Hawkeye as a result of the event that happens to him during Widowmaker, you need to read the separate miniseries from, pardon me, 2012, which is Hawkeye Blind Spot. And that then covers kind of the impact of what's going on with Hawkeye. Okay, so after Widowmaker, it's actually then a few years later in 2014, we finally have Black Widow Volume 5. Again, the volume with a big V, meaning series or season. This was from 2014 to 2015. It was written by Nathan Edmondson with art by Phil Noto. Everyone raves about how good the art is. And they're not wrong. The art is absolutely fucking banging. The covers are amazing. The internal art is great. Um, the first trade paperback is called The Finely Woven Thread. And the first arc is very, very strong. I was a little bit annoyed by the stupid sub-thread about domestic violence in issue 3 that I don't want to spoil, but speaking to someone who's worked closely with a lot of domestic violence survivors, issue 3 was stupid. I'm just going to say that. Trade paperback 2, which is the second story arc, that's called The Tightly Tangled Web. And whilst the first story arc was issues 1 to 6, the second story arc, The Tightly Tangled Web, is issues 7 to 12. Now, I read this as single issues, and so it took me a few weeks to realize that actually, whilst it's issue 7 to 12, that trade paperback, The Tightly Tangled Web, also includes Punisher issue 9, which was also being written by Nathan Edmondson at the time. Now, that Punisher issue 9, it did sort of baffle me as to where that should fit in within issue 7 to 12 of Black Widow. Ultimately, that issue 9 of Punisher, is set as a paraquel, which means it's set simultaneous and parallel to Black Widow issue 9. However, that said, I would recommend reading it probably after issue 12 as just a nice little kind of extra feature or Easter egg or bonus. Or you can just ignore it. The Punisher issue is not essential in terms of reading the Black Widow issue 7 to 12. By the way, I'm not sure what's happened here during this particular series or season, but something has happened that means Natasha has lost her memory of her relationship with the Winter Soldier and all their backstory and stuff. If anyone knows what happened here, please put it in the comments down below, because I wasn't sure like what caused this. And I couldn't work it out from either the issues or any research I could do. So I would appreciate if anyone could put me right. Finally, the last few issues here are collected in Black Widow Last Days, which is the third trade paperback collection for this series. And again, banging covers throughout. Okay, that said, moving on from Black Widow Volume 5, we thankfully have something quite straightforward as the next thing, which is Black Widow Volume 6. So this is the very, very famous, very, very well-regarded Wade and Samney run. It's collected in two bits, so there's two trade paperbacks. The first one is trade paperback 1 called Shield's Most Wanted, including issues 1 to 6. And then you have trade paperback 2, which is called No More Secrets, including trade issues 7 till 12. This starts off really strong, like really strong. The first issue is absolutely banging, absolutely stellar in every way. Um, yeah, I can't endorse that first issue enough. The series as a whole is good. Unfortunately, it doesn't maintain the brilliance of that opening issue. It's decent. I can see why it's well regarded. I'm very glad I read it. I enjoyed it. I'm not going to go out of my way to pick it up physically, and I'm not sure there is even a hardcover edition. And if there was a hardcover, I'm not sure I would pick it up. But there you are, the very well regarded Wade and Samney run. That then takes us into slight spoiler territory. So, in my reading orders, I avoid spoilers as much as humanly possible. However, in this case, it's extremely hard to avoid a spoiler in terms of what happens next. And the reason I say that is that the next issue I talk about, after I talk about, and don't worry, I'm not going to give a spoiler, but after I talk about the spoiler that's going to happen in very vague terms, the next Black Widow issue literally has the spoiler explained in the first panel of the first page of the first issue. So you need to be aware. I'm going to recommend you read something, and I strongly recommend you read it before you read the next thing. What I recommend you read is Secret Empire, the Marvel event. I know it wasn't a popular event. I personally loved it. I thought the main series of Secret Empire absolutely slays. It's really good. I'm really glad to have it in my collection. But in Secret Empire, something happens which is fundamentally important to what's going on with Natasha, the main character of Black Widow. If you don't read Secret Empire and you read subsequent issues that I'm going to recommend, it will spoil the thing that happens with Natasha in Secret Empire. So I'd strongly recommend reading Secret Empire, even if you don't want to. Okay, enough veiled tiptoeing around that spoiler. On to the next thing. What's next? Well, it's not Black Widow. It's actually Tales of Suspense, Hawkeye and Winter Soldier. Now, these are issues 100 to 104, and this is utterly brilliant. I absolutely love this. The trade paperback is really hard to find, so are the single issues, to be honest. I am planning on getting this custom bound over the next few months because this was utterly brilliant. The story features Natasha, but also features Yelena very prominently. At this point, Yelena's gone through a whole process of like, she died, resurrected, came back as an evil Hydra thing. She was in, I think, Thunderbolts at one point. All sorts of stuff going on with Yelena. Very confusing. But this is kind of a soft reset for the character. Trust me, she's no longer a lingerie model. And this is just a great, great series that you have to read at this point. after Secret Empire, but before any other Black Widow issues. If you are reading Tales of Suspense and you're trying to track it down and finding it difficult, I don't blame you. It is quite complicated to understand what's going on. Tales of Suspense is a 104 issue series that started being published way back in the day in 1959, and then it was published in a sort of one form from issues 1 to 38. And then it was called Tales of Suspense Iron Man up until issue 58. And then it started being called Tales of Suspense Iron Man and Captain America up until issue 99. And issue 99 then came out, well, absolutely ages ago, years and years ago. And then they just kind of rebooted it in 2017 for Tales of Suspense 100. Given that Tales of Suspense 99 was, I want to say that came out in 1969. So literally like 40 years later, they then suddenly come out with issue 100. So if you do find it hard to track it down, don't worry about it. All you need is the modern stories, as in the stuff that came out after the 70s, which is issues 100 to 104, Tales of Suspense, Hawkeye and Winter Soldier. Brilliant story, brilliant writing, highly recommended in and of itself anyway. So with that out of the way, we're finally back in explicit Black Widow territory. We have Black Widow Volume 7. This is set after Secret Empire and after Tales of Suspense. It's a 5-issue arc called No Restraints Play, and the covers are awesome. It's written by two siblings, Jen Sasker and Sylvia Sasker, and with covers by Clayton Crane, which is amazing. It's really good. It's a great series. It's a great story. It's well written, well characterized, brilliant art. Um, it didn't quite nail this in the same as well as I wanted it to, or in the same way that I think it should have been done if someone like Greg Rucka was writing it. But to be fair, that's me just quibbling. This is good, recommended. After Volume 7, the next thing is, well, it's a whole new title, Web of Black Widow. Now, this is a decent story written by Jody Houser with art by Stephen Money. It's 5 issues long, and Yelena is in this as well as a supporting character. So again, it's yet another one of these series that has both the widows in there. So that's Web of Black Widow, which came out very recently, and that was then followed by Black Widow Volume or Series or Season 8, which was from 2020 to 2022. This is collected as 3 trade paperbacks, which I'll talk about in a second, and is brilliant across the board. Written by Marjorie Liu, and like I say, I have a hit and miss relationship with Marjorie Liu, but in this, it is all hits. This entire story was brilliant. And it features Yelena as the White Widow now. That's what she goes by, and she's a major supporting character throughout. Um, this is brilliant. I'm getting it made as a custom bind hardcover at some point in the next year. Really good read. The first arc is called The Ties That Bind, and it's the first issues 1 to 5. A lot of places seem to get the name of this trade paperback wrong. I don't know why, but they do. The next trade paperback is issues 6 to 10 and called I Am the Black Widow. Brilliant story. And then the final trade paperback that finishes off the collection by Marjorie Liu is issues 11 to 15, and it's called Die by the Blade. Like I said, I'm going to get all 15 issues put into a custom hardcover because this is just a brilliant story. I was really worried it wasn't going to nail the landing, but it did at the end, and it was great. Something just to note is that the covers here do actually have the legacy numbers on the covers, as well as the actual kind of issues 1 to 15. If you're interested in what legacy numbers are, I'm going to do a video on that at some point relatively soon as well. That almost takes us to the end, but the one final bit I just want to point out is this series that came out in 2021-22. So this is a Yelena focused story exclusively of her, and this series is called Winter Guard. Now, it opens with a one-shot, which is called Widowmakers, which has got Yelena and the Red Guardian. And that came out in 2020. I think, to be honest, it's a story they just threw out there because it was a pretty self-contained Red Guardian and Yelena story, and COVID was happening. But as a result of that, that then sort of leads pretty smoothly into this 4-issue series, Winter Guard, which started coming out in 2021. The one thing I would warn you about Winter Guard as a story is that in the first issue, it talks about how it's been set up by something like the She-Hulk has got abducted or something in an Avengers story. They mention it once, it's basically not relevant. Don't feel like you need to read whatever was going on with She-Hulk or whatever's going on with Avengers to read Winter Guard. Winter Guard works absolutely fine by itself. And like I say, it's a Yelena focused story. Right, 25 minutes. There we go. Well, we're at the end of it. That was the entire reading order. I'm going to do a couple of honorable mentions in a second, but I just want to go back to this image and show you what we have here. I've got every single series you need to read with their title and what the series is in sequence, and obviously that spoiler of you need to read Secret Empire in the middle there. And then you can see the arrows on the left and the right. From the arrows, that's there just to indicate to you if that particular series is a Natasha series or is that series a Yelena series. Some of them obviously are both, some of them are just the one or just the other. So if, for example, you're reading this and you're like, hey, I actually just want to read Natasha and I don't care about Yelena, you know which series to skip. Similarly, vice versa, if you're a fan of Yelena and not a fan of Tasha, then you know which ones to skip again. So hopefully this is a useful infographic for you to have. When I sort out the new mapping software that I'm going to be using on my website and as part of my YouTube channel, I'll probably stick this up there as well. But just so you know, this is the reading order. A couple of final honorable mentions. There was a one shot called Black Widow, The Widow's Sting that came out in 2020. Again, I think this is something they just threw out during COVID because they had it lying around somewhere. And finally, there is a series. So if you type in, Black Widow series, or you go into Marvel Unlimited and you're looking for them, you will come across a Black Widow and the Marvel Girls, which was from 2009, 2010. This is not in the Marvel 616 continuity. Black Widow and the Marvel Girls is Earth 20051 and is four one-shots that cover respectively Black Widow and Enchantress, Black Widow and the Wasp, Black Widow and Miss Marvel, although it's Miss Marvel in her Warbird persona, which frankly is my preferable kind of depiction of Miss Marvel. And finally, Black Widow and Storm. That's the fourth issue. They're decent, but they're one shots. They have nothing to do with the actual continuity of the 616. Read them if you want, but don't read them thinking that they're going to be an important part of a Black Widow in continuity reading order. Okay, wow, there we are. A whirlwind tour of 110 Black Widow issues. Hopefully that was useful. Hopefully that content kind of is helpful to you. And yeah, don't worry, there's going to be more reading orders coming on, but I just thought I'd do this quick, relatively short self-contained one that I could do in one video just while I'm working on the really big ones that are coming down the pipe very, very soon. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.